I recently got the chance to experience the future of Amtrak Midwest. But let's not get too ahead of ourselves here. Yes, new trains like the Siemens Venture coaches I travel on in this video are exciting. However, there will always be roadblocks totally out of Amtrak's control that, despite their modernizations, will continue to affect passenger experiences for years to come, unless necessary actions are taken. What exactly do I mean by this, and just how much of an improvement are these new Amtrak coaches? Find out the answers to both of these questions in today's video, as we travel from Chicago to Bloomington-Normal on Amtrak's Lincoln service. Let's go. Today's journey actually starts off at Chicago O'Hare International Airport. I had just flown in from Atlanta, the subject of an earlier video, and needed to reach Union Station downtown to catch my train. The easiest and cheapest way to get from O'Hare to downtown, or vice versa, is the CTA Blue Line. Now, granted, the 18-mile journey on the Blue Line from O'Hare to downtown takes a whopping 45 minutes on a good day. But for $5 one way, you can't really complain a whole lot. It's worth mentioning that most one-way tickets on CTA subway trains are only $2.50, including travel to O'Hare. It's only when you travel from O'Hare that the price increases to double the amount. Also, from my understanding, the one-way fare you pay applies to any distance traveled. So theoretically, you could pay $2.50 and only travel between two neighboring stations like Rosemont and Cumberland, or use that same $2.50 and travel from Rosemont all the way to Forest Park. Again, if your journey starts at O'Hare, then that price would be $5. About 45 minutes after leaving O'Hare, we arrive at Clinton Street, which is the closest Blue Line stop to Union Station. The walk from Clinton Street CTA to Union Station is said to take around 6 minutes, but I walk fast, and so it took me around 5 minutes. I'm here about 30 minutes before my train departs, and ideally, if you ever take Amtrak from a major station, you should plan to reach about 30 to 40 minutes before departure time. Tonight's train is the 7:10 p.m. Lincoln Service 307. It's my first time ever taking this route, but this actually was not my original plan. You see, initially I had planned to fly into O'Hare around 10 a.m., and after a few hours, take the 4:05 p.m. Illini train 393 directly home to Champaign. Long story short, I ended up arriving into O'Hare at 5 p.m. as opposed to 10 a.m., meaning I missed my 4:05 p.m. train. Or did I? Thankfully, I had bought my Amtrak ticket with the worst case scenario in mind. I knew that a delay or some sort of hiccup was bound to happen that would have prompted me to cancel my ticket. As such, I knowingly booked a business class ticket on the 4:05 train because if any hiccups were to occur, Amtrak business class tickets are totally refundable, so I would get all of my money back. The day earlier, I was notified that one of my flights would be heavily delayed, and upon hearing this, I rebooked myself onto later flights back to Chicago so I could still get back home the same day, albeit at a later time. I then canceled my original Amtrak reservation and received a full refund for that $36 ticket. All that was left was to look for other trains to get back home. So with my new flights booked, I would land in O'Hare around 5 p.m. At this point, the best option to get directly back home would be the train you see right here, the 8:05 p.m. City of New Orleans, which arrives in Champaign around 10:30 p.m. Unfortunately, this train was completely sold out, leaving me with no other direct train options to get back home. Now it was time to get creative. Champaign lies on the Chicago to Carbondale corridor, which further extends southward to Memphis, Jackson, and New Orleans. There are 3 trains leaving Chicago each day that eventually stop in Champaign. Obviously, this option is off the table now. The second closest rail corridor is Chicago to St. Louis, and the closest station on this line to Champaign is Bloomington-Normal at around 40 minutes away. This line sees 5 trains a day leaving Chicago, and sure enough, one of those trains still had some availability left. So without any hesitation, I booked a coach seat on the 7:10 p.m. train 307 for $16 one way. Ideally, I would arrive in Bloomington by 9:20 p.m., where my father would come to the rescue, and bring me home. Also, fun fact, Bloomington-Normal is the second busiest Amtrak station in Illinois behind only Chicago, and fourth busiest in the entire Midwest, serving over 250,000 passengers each year. That's primarily thanks to Normal being a college town, and the fact that the rail line connects two major cities, Chicago and St. Louis. Okay, so this fact is actually not true anymore. It was pre-pandemic, but as of 2021, the numbers have changed a little bit. So Bloomington-Normal is no longer the second busiest Amtrak station in Illinois, and it's no longer the fourth busiest in the entire Midwest. It's actually now third busiest in Illinois and fifth busiest in the Midwest. As of 2021, the second busiest station in Illinois and fourth busiest in the entire Midwest is good old Champaign-Urbana, my hometown. We are now the second busiest in Illinois following Chicago Union Station. Bloomington falls behind at third place, and I believe Springfield is fourth place. All of Amtrak's Midwest corridor services and most of the long-distance trains depart from the South Concourse of Union Station. The Amtrak gate waiting areas are nothing special, they're just a bunch of seats with some vending machines. Soon boarding was called on time and we walked out to board our train on track number 20. The Lincoln service was one of the first Amtrak Midwest routes to feature the brand new Siemens Venture cars when they entered service last year. Amtrak ordered over 600 Venture cars as part of a major fleet renewal project, with 97 cars being dedicated for the Midwestern state-supported routes serving Illinois, Michigan, Missouri, and Wisconsin. These cars will eventually replace the Amfleet and Horizon cars, which entered service in the 70s and 90s respectively. At the moment, Amtrak has yet to introduce the new business class and cafe cars, as until now, only the new coach cars are in service. As such, trains are still using older Horizon or Amfleet cars to provide the business class and cafe services, with our train having a Horizon cafe/business class car on the rear. The new Venture cars have an updated paint scheme intended to match the locomotives used on Amtrak's Midwest services, the Siemens SC44 Charger. I really like this new livery, both how modern it is and also how it maintains a sense of uniformity with the locomotive. Immediately upon stepping into these new cars, you'll notice large luggage racks and seating areas for wheelchair passengers located on one end. These coaches are slightly taller than their predecessors, and it's very noticeable as you enter. You definitely feel a lot more open space as you walk through the aisle. Half the seats in these coaches face forward, while the other half face backward. The seats have fixed headrests that are folded inwards but noticeably less padding than the older coaches. The seats also come with a coat hook and a large fold-down tray table that doesn't extend, but there's really no need for it to do so. At the bottom is a netted seat pocket that houses the safety card, and in terms of legroom, I'm 5'11" and there's a decent amount of space here. The seats also come with two power outlets that are located in between, below the armrest. This is an improvement over the older cars, where the outlets were located on the wall by the windows. Finally, there are personal reading lights above each seat as well.
That's not the craziest thing that exists. It's crazy in my opinion. But how about like there's
As we depart Union Station, here's a brief look at the route today. The Lincoln service runs 284 miles down to St. Louis, with stops in Summit, Joliet, Dwight, Pontiac, Bloomington, Lincoln, Springfield, Carlinville, and Alton. But not all trains stop at each station. There are actually 4 trains each day, 2 northbound and 2 southbound, that actually skip a couple of stations. Train 301 is the ultimate express train and does not stop in Summit, Dwight, Pontiac, or Carlinville. Train 306 only skips Dwight Station. And finally, trains 300 and our train 307 do not stop in either Dwight or Carlinville. The Chicago-St. Louis corridor is also the only corridor in Illinois where trains can reach speeds of 110 miles per hour. At the moment, they're still testing the line for revenue 110 mile per hour service. However, in previous history, trains have been tested in excess of 100 miles per hour on this route. As I settled into the journey, I noticed that these seats in the new Venture cars are actually pretty tall. I couldn't see anyone sitting in front of me, which was a pretty cool feeling. The seats do recline, by the way, but the recline button is in a sort of awkward position on the side underneath the armrest. Despite having luggage racks on the ends, the new Venture cars also have storage racks above the seats. There's also a ceiling-mounted LCD which theoretically should be showing the next upcoming station, but these are not working yet. There are, however, similar displays mounted on the windows which do indeed work, but these face towards the outside. As expected, the new cars do feature onboard free Wi-Fi, but unfortunately the connection is still pretty spotty and not the fastest. Soon we reached our first stop of Summit, Illinois, about 20 minutes after leaving Chicago, followed by Joliet a half hour later. If you recall, at the beginning of the video I mentioned that despite Amtrak's modernization, there will always be roadblocks out of their control that will continue to affect passenger services. Well, it was unexpectedly here in Joliet where we hit the first of these roadblocks. We arrived bang on time at 8 p.m. and ideally we should have departed Joliet by 8:05 p.m. latest. Around 8:10 p.m. the conductor made an announcement saying we were stuck waiting for the dispatcher to give us the all clear to proceed. Why didn't we have the all clear in the first place? 2 words: freight trains. Some of you may have heard this by now, but Amtrak does not own most of the tracks it operates on. The vast majority of tracks that Amtrak uses are owned by freight railroads, and the Chicago to St. Louis line is mainly owned by Union Pacific. Now, freight trains are required by law to give priority to passenger trains. However, this is never really enforced. As such, the main culprit behind Amtrak trains being late so often is because they have to wait for freight trains. Tonight we waited for not 1 but 2 freight trains to pass by on the opposite track. 8:12 p.m. came around, and with it, northbound train 318. Funny enough, this is technically supposed to be Lincoln Service train 304, but at the moment, Amtrak has it listed as 318 Lincoln Service Missouri River Runner. The story behind this is, I assume due to equipment shortages, Amtrak is currently combining 2 Lincoln Service trains, 1 in each direction, with the Missouri River Runner service that operates between St. Louis and Kansas City. So from Chicago, what was formerly train 303 from Chicago to St. Louis now operates as train 319 from Chicago all the way through to Kansas City. And similarly, what was formerly train 304 is now train 318 from Kansas City to Chicago. You also may have noticed that this train has 2 baggage cars. These aren't even used by passengers. The only reason the baggage cars are there, and this is going to sound really confusing, is so that the train meets the minimum required axle count by Union Pacific in order to activate railroad crossing signals. That count is 32 axles, and while it doesn't really apply for the St. Louis to Chicago segment, it does between Kansas City and St. Louis. A similar axle requirement is present on my local rail line from Chicago to Carbondale, where all trains have to be 32 axles minimum as well. After over 30 minutes of sitting in Joliet, we finally departed at 8:33 p.m., now running a little over a half hour late. Again, if freight companies would actually follow the law, unnecessary delays like this would never happen. Before taking this train, I was under the impression that the on-time performance on this route was somewhat good. But out of all the times I've taken the Illinois Corridor trains, this was by far one of the worst experiences I've ever had with regards to on-time performance. I know, that's crazy. We soon expressed through Dwight, Illinois, and given that it's a small village, it was gone within a matter of seconds. Our next stop came nearly an hour after leaving Joliet, Pontiac, Illinois.
Pontiac. Bloomington-Normal will be next in 30 minutes. Bloomington-Normal coming up 30 minutes.
After leaving Pontiac, the cafe finally opened up for service. Yes, 2 hours after leaving Chicago was when the cafe opened up. Not sure why this was, but I related this to the second hiccup that continues to affect not only Amtrak, but the rest of the travel industry, and that's staffing shortages. I don't know why the cafe took this long to open, but Anyway, all I bought was a bottle of apple juice. The next order of business was to check out the bathrooms, which on today's train were seemingly always occupied. But when I was able to check it out, it was nice to see that these new bathrooms have modern amenities and plenty of space as expected. After that, I returned to my seat and stayed there until we arrived in Bloomington-Normal.
Absolutely nothing is ever any confusing.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is Bloomington-Normal. Bloomington-Normal.
Tell there.
It's just literally 5 words, like it's not that exciting. Or 5 letters. Oh, there is a men's version. 52 shy 7 of them.
That was all I filmed from this trip, so let me quickly summarize my thoughts on Amtrak's new Siemens Venture coaches, since that's the main purpose of this video. Overall, they're pretty nice, and I'm looking forward to seeing these enter service on more Midwestern trains, including those that serve my hometown. The coaches themselves are more spacious and modern than their predecessors, obviously, and you can't really complain much for what you get. While the seats are definitely less comfortable than the older cars, they're still decent and not totally unbearable. Without a doubt, my experience on Amtrak tonight was fine, except for certain events that, of course, were out of the company's control. Let me know if you've ever gotten the chance to experience these new rail cars and what your opinions are on them. Thanks so much for watching this video, and if you enjoyed it, please smash that like button, and if you're new to my channel, don't forget to subscribe. That's all for today, folks, so please take care, and I will see you all very soon in the next video. Goodbye.